Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Religious Revolution, The Birth of Modern Spirituality, 1848 to 1898, by Dominic Green, narrated by Dominic Green. To Maya. We know that the world was made at one cast. What we find in ourselves we recognize all around us. Whatever man sees, that he has a key to in his own mind. The religious impulse is the most revolutionary principle in human experience, uplifting and impelling the man beyond himself. Every nation of the globe is, in our day, whether willingly or reluctantly, holding up its sacred books and traditions to our eyes, and we find in our mythology a key to theirs, and in our experiences a key to their experience. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Natural Religion, 1867. Prologue, 1848. Great Expectations. Scything through sleeping woods, deaf to birds and blind to flowers, the Paris Express thunders on through northern France. The earth shakes, the air sings, the beast breathes black smoke. Through the carriage window, the American passenger sees the old world in magic lantern images, a church spire and a flock of cottages, a stream and a green coppice, cattle and farmers like figures from a forgotten allegory. Overhead, a black spool of telegraph cable carries hidden code, a stutter of prices, politics, and gossip for the evening papers. The passenger feels his body vibrate. A bishop blessed the first train to travel on this line. A band played the Song of the Railways, music by Hector Berlioz, lyrics by Jules Janin. We, the witnesses to the marvels of industry, must sing to peace, to the king, to the worker, the country, and to commerce and all its benefits. From Boulogne on the bare coast of Picardy, through Lille and Arras, where cotton mill chimneys jostle the turrets of medieval belfries, down into the valleys of the green Somme and sleepy Oise, past the Gothic cathedral of Saint-Denis and the bones of dead kings, on through the villas and factories, vegetable plots and grubby tenements, grand avenues and lightless slums, the train carves a straight and graded line through the rippled surface of earth and its topsoil of human settlement until, in an ecstasy of brakes and whistles and steam, it stops. From Boulogne to Paris, 56 leagues, 7½ mortal hours. The power and haste of modern life. A tall man with a clerical air, a face of angles and planes, and dark hair turning to grey, steps onto the platform. It is May 1848, the spring of nations, and Ralph Waldo Emerson has come to Paris. The sooty air is moistened by an unusually wet and cold spring. These are Europe's hungry 40s. The crops are rotting in the fields, and food prices are rising. There are mobs in the cities, and famine is in the country. There is mass starvation in Ireland, war in Italy, and revolution in the German states. Emigrants crowd the ports. Cholera crosses to the New World in steerage. In Paris the streets are bare. Yet another French Revolution has begun. The plane trees have been chopped down for barricades. It was an age of grand ideas and great expectations, and it forged our ecstasies and discontents. An age fascinated by speed and awed by machines. An age of evolutionary biology and religious fundamentalism, of global powers and tribal politics. An age of glowing cities and traditions lost, of the lone genius and the huddled masses, of restless tedium and the torments of hope. An age that believed in the infinite advance of knowledge, endured the infinite emptiness of a universe without purpose, and succoured a pantheon of new gods. That age created global markets and global consciousness, but also class war and scientific racism. It dreamt of peace and genocide, chemical cures and chemical weapons. It overthrew the ancient authority of church and crown for the volatile gambles of democracy and the market. It freed women, slaves, and serfs, but it harnessed children to its factories and subject peoples to its empires. It was the new age, the era of democracy and emancipation. But the emancipated yearned to elect new Caesars. Its vocabulary is ours. Spirituality, evolution, ecology, crisis, culture war, diversity, Darwinist, fundamentalist, neurotic, organic, sadism, masochism, atomic power, karma, reincarnation. So are its pleasures. The department store, 1838. The motor vehicle, 1870. The telephone, 1875. The moving image, 1895. And also its consolations of knowledge and escapism. Thermodynamic entropy, 1851. The germ theory of disease, 1870. Synthetic opiates, 1874. Pornographic films, 1895. The contents of the atom, 1911. And so are its ideals, the transcendent principles that give meaning to life by appearing, like gods, to exist outside the world they create and explain. Religion featured in few of these innovations, but religiosity thrived amid them all. The age of scientific and technological discovery was also one of frantic religious creativity. Today, the world's largest democracies, the United States and India, are the world's most religious democracies. The market in spirituality is a multi-billion-dollar industry, from package tour pilgrimages to mail-order crystals. 200 years ago, perhaps a handful of Christians believed in reincarnation, and if they did, they were heretics. Today, at least a third of Americans believe not only that they have a soul that survives death, but also that it previously belonged to someone or something else. We want new cars and old souls, a life technological, founded on scientific rationality, but understood through our eternal wishes for meaning, endurance, and transcendence, the overcoming of mortality. This speculative realm of dreams and nightmares is the perennial province of religion, art, and sexuality. It is also the modern province of politics. As the net of technological civilization covered the globe, both provinces fell within the new empire of spirituality, the distinctively modern experience of inner life as comprehensive and near simultaneous, novel in its infusion of biological ideas and technological metaphors, yet strangely familiar, even archaic. We became like this in the late 19th century, when mass communications, mass politics, and global markets converged, transforming lives across the world. People, products, and ideas moved faster and farther than ever before. Travel and communication became standardized to Greenwich Mean Time. English became the global argot of trade. The erosion of inherited beliefs and customs and the eruption of new ideas and experiences forced a radical reordering of values. Nietzsche's Death of God was only an obituary for the Christian deity, a clearing away of the old so that new ideas of divinity could flower, and reports of the Almighty's death turned out to be greatly exaggerated. Certainly, the established religions lost ground, especially when new ideas and institutions mimicked the old forms. But the weakening of organized religion liberated the religious impulse from the inherited restraints of hierarchy and dogma. Rather than atrophying like a superfluous evolutionary inheritance, religiosity surged in hypertrophic vigor. The machine pulse of urban life and the rational proofs of science cracked the old barriers between the sacred and the profane. As the religious impulse flooded into all aspects of individual consciousness and collective endeavor, it sanctified all with a transcendent significance, and disturbed the rule of Brahmins in Boston as in Bombay. Suddenly, the heights of religious experience were no longer the privilege of hereditary male elites, nor was religious joy the meager fruit of renunciation, abstinence, or retreat. Like Napoleon, who crowned himself emperor when the Pope wavered, the modern individual personalizes his or her beatitude. And, like Napoleon, who wanted to conquer India but never went there, the modern individual seeks to combine West and East, rational and sublime, personal and collective, science, and spirit. As Emerson exhorted Margaret Fuller, write your own Bible. Emerson's religious impulse seems to be innate to our species. The oldest known human burial site is around 100,000 years old. A man daubed in red dust, curled in the fetal position, and cradling a wild boar's jawbone, an accessory for the afterlife. The evolutionary value of religiosity has become a modern commonplace. Transcendent ideas and experiences bond us to our kin and its goals. They explain the twin mysteries of life and death and the problem of altruism. Religious ethics sustain society by restraining personal desires in the name of the common good, notably by controlling sexual and marital relations. As for the frustrations this might cause, religious ethics protect society by externalizing aggression and even rationalizing self-sacrifice as the ultimate altruism. Anthropologists have identified over 100,000 religions. All are the work of Homo sapiens, none the work of apes. Religiosity is a threshold of human consciousness. It is human to possess religiosity, but its possession does not protect against inhumanity. Crudely, the difference between religiosity and religion is the difference between hunger and lunch. Hunger is a biological inheritance, its pangs inescapable proof of our nature. Lunch is a result of recent cultural evolution. The menu varies and is shaped by environment and appetite. Religion explains and organizes the experience of life, and when that experience changes, so does its explanation. The religious impulse endures, but its forms are flexible, and its ideas and practices rise and fall like dynasties and empires. While biological evolution is glacially slow, culture evolves as far and fast as we can think, and sometimes faster than our minds and societies can bear. Scientific ideas change our language and our minds, our perception of life. The application of scientific ideas through technology changes our experience of the physical world, compressing distance and increasing speed, creating new conjunctions and capabilities. Ours is the age in which science lifted the veil from the material world, from the dance of the planets to the epic of heredity. But this has not been enough. Different lives require new ideas, new personal and collective goals whose pursuit transcends the inchoate and mundane and gives meaning to life, or rather, transcendent meaning to life. For our age of scientific rationality, planned economy, and organized politics is also one of mass folly and biological mysticism. We venerate facts and we rely on technology, but we remain enchanted by the irrational, the mystical, and the metaphysical. Our city life with machines created new social ideas and experiences, and these inspired new myths and ideals. These spiritual innovations are the common thread in the crazy quilt of modern life. Some responded to the weakening of traditional Christianity by fashioning a new faith. Eliphas Levi's occultism, Auguste Comte's religion of humanity, Helena Blavatsky's theosophy, and Nietzsche's Superman were all spiritual responses to science and the dilemmas of modern individuality. For others, notably socialists and nationalists, politics was the explicit heir to religion, with the state replacing the church and race theory and the cult of blood replacing theology and miracles. Even the holy trinity of skeptical materialism, Marx, Darwin, and Freud, were resisted in their own fields. Marx struggled against the Christian socialists who preceded him and the Jewish and German socialists who followed him. Darwin contended with his own ambivalence about a purposeless universe, as well as Alfred Russel Wallace and the precursors of intelligent design theory. Freud could not prevent Jung from turning the biology of the mind toward racial mysticism. The religious impulse demands explanations and purpose, images of perfection, and the logic of history and myth. Before we refashion nature, nature fashions us. When innate religiosity interacted with science and the technological society it created, the results were the explosive isms, the irrational appeals to salvation by nationalism, socialism, and racism that derailed the global civilization once in 1914 and again in 1939. This is what New Age originally meant. Not an aisle of options in Whole Foods Market, but the total transformation of individual consciousness, a rebirth leading to a greater transformation, the remaking of the individual and society. Technology created the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. I call the modern transformation of inner life the religious revolution. All religious movements in history, Emerson observed, and perhaps all political revolutions founded on rights, are only new examples of the deep emotion that can agitate a community of unthinking men when a truth familiar in words, that God is within us, is made for a time a conviction. A movement to restore the individual's spirit creates its social image. Protestantism made the personal political because religion was now politics. The personal conviction that God is within us implied the political faith that God is with us. The wars of religion led to the emergence of nation-states and national churches with vernacular Bibles. Their politics were thick with apocalyptic arousal. The communities led by Jan of Leiden, John Calvin, and Oliver Cromwell believed that their leap of faith would land in the last days of history. To hasten its joyous end and secure their permanent salvation, they sought to perfect society in the biblical image. Religious impulses now expressed themselves in the new vocabularies of politics and science. While Henry VIII formed a national church, Copernicus placed the sun, not the earth, at the center of the universe. The ideal human became the hyphenated kind that Emerson's age called the Renaissance man. Thomas More was a Machiavellian politician, a Platonic philosopher, and eventually a saint. Francis Bacon was an empiricist philosopher, the Lord Chancellor of a Protestant nation-state, and a practical scientist. By the 17th century, Protestants were feeling spiritual and soulful. Catholics, having fought the Protestant model, now adapted it and developed a competing brand, with a new technology, the confession box, as its incubator. As science emerged from the shattered unities of what was then called natural philosophy, so spirituality emerged from the cracked rock of organized religion. The individual conscience found itself in an unmapped continent, an America of the inner world. It deciphered the mechanics and customs of this strange land with the telescope and microscope, observation and rational analysis. It appeared that the Renaissance rediscovery of pre-Christian philosophy and literature was not just a rebirth of scholarship and skeptical reason. When the new science viewed nature without the aid of Christian dogma, it returned to nature in its pagan sense. The universe was a vast, amoral theatre of incomprehensible forces, the individual, an actor in a drama without a script. Until the 19th century, only the bold or reckless had dared to face the widening gap between Christian dogma and the new science. Pioneers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Jefferson, and William Blake had appeared in the salons of the Enlightenment and the antic parade of Romanticism. Similar sentiments had appeared sporadically among the leaders of the American Revolution and prominently among the ideologues of the French Revolution, where the new spirituality confirmed its potential for tyranny and havoc. The world, the poet Friedrich Schiller had complained, was disenchanted, but the need for meaning, transcendence, and immortality persisted. The religious impulse, deprived of the next world, reoriented toward this one. It turned outward into society, to pursue redemption through secular politics and the Epicurean good life, and it turned inward into consciousness. The once omnipotent traditions might dissolve, Emerson wrote, but their moral sentiment and metaphysical fact survive as a permanent essence, expressed by each new crop of geniuses. Heir to the early adopters of spiritual democracy and soulful religion, Emerson's significance for the religious revolution is akin to that of Benjamin Franklin for the American Revolution or Rousseau for the French. He might not have caused it, but it would not have been the same without him. In Emerson, the streams of a global tide met for the first time. In the 1830s, the young Emerson realized that 7 generations of Puritan rigor had desiccated into the famine of Unitarianism, a faith that dominated New England's society while starving its spirit. If his defection from Christianity heralded the popular shift from religion to spirituality, the direction of his spirit anticipated the modern movement. As an heir of Romanticism, Emerson revered nature and intuition as divine. He believed in Kant's promise that the mind was moral, and he expected that the materials of aesthetic and spiritual perfection lay in the mystic East, beyond the sources of Christianity. As an inhabitant of an age of empire, philology, and cheap print, Emerson could read sacred Hindu texts in English through the translations of the East India Company and the efforts of his Aunt Mary, who supplied him with its publications. And as an English-speaking liberal, Emerson was also heir to the optimistic, tolerant strand of the individualist revolt. He linked freedom in religion to freedom in politics and commerce. He trusted that the freedoms of thought, religiosity, and commerce would, like the Three Musketeers, fight for one another. The powers that make a capitalist are metaphysical. So we can call July 15th, 1838, the day that Emerson declared the religious revolution in the United States, the day that, speaking at Harvard Divinity School, he deliberately provoked the divines by contrasting the church with the soul, and in a manner reflecting dimly on the church and radiantly on the soul. This, though, might have remained a purely Unitarian scandal, in the way that the Stamp Act might have remained a tax dispute or the 95 Theses a reform proposal. In the first decade of Emerson's century, William Blake had cried, "Rouse up, O young men of the new age," but few had listened. The difference is in the changes in environment, political, economic, and above all, technological, that carried the religious revolution from the intellectual fringe to the mass market and catalyzed it into a global phenomenon. Almost 10 years to the day after the Harvard Divinity School address, Emerson stepped off the train in Paris. He had come from a lecture tour of Britain that, despite the acclaim that awaited him in every hall, had left him thoroughly discomfited. The cost of metaphysical capitalism was written in the flesh. Britain's cities were filthy, its people were hard-eyed and brutal, and their ragged children begged in the rain. Coal dust and soot coated the entire island. In what remained of the countryside, they stained even the wool on the sheep. The industrial city was the crucible of modern life. In Paris, Emerson recognized one of its products. Socialism, once a gospel of vegetarian cranks, now emerged as a feature new to history, a doctrine of mass democracy. The rioting and rhetoric frightened him. The crowds seemed murderous and atavistic. The political rally was a primitive rite, a modern witch hunt. Torchlight processions have a sleek and sleigh look, dripping burning oil drops, and the bearers now and then smiting the torch on the ground and then lifting it into the air. The intuitions that Emerson prized as divine led the marchers toward appalling outcomes: hatred, violence, and a conformity in which one solitary walker was no different from another. The transition from the woods of New England to the cities of Europe confounded his inner Sibyl. For the matter of socialism there are no oracles. The oracle is dumb. Emerson knew his Hegel. The religious impulse never slept, never ceased, uplifting and impelling the man beyond himself. The forces that had unmade the old ways and faiths would also shape the new, universal, and absolute, supreme beauty. One way or another, the revolutionary principle of the expanded soul would emerge from technical civilization. He must seek the biological pattern that lay behind the smoky, speed-blurred images of modern life. When Emerson returned to Concord, he took to a diet of scientific and economic literature. Poetry had brought him this far, but from here on, the currents of the universal being would speak the language of science. This is the age of the religious revolution. It is also the age of science and race. This is the age of the religious revolution because it is the age of science and race. Part 1. The Development Hypothesis, 1848 to 1871. But mankind are now conscious of their new position. The conviction is already not far from being universal that the times are pregnant with change, and that the 19th century will be known to posterity as the era of one of the greatest revolutions of which history has preserved the remembrance, in the human mind and in the whole constitution of human society. Even the religious world teems with new interpretations of the prophecies, foreboding mighty changes near at hand. It is felt that men are henceforth to be held together by new ties and separated by new barriers. For the ancient bonds will now no longer unite, nor the ancient boundaries confine. John Stuart Mill, The Spirit of the Age, 1831. Chapter 1. The New Prometheus. Socialists and Spiritualists in the Age of the Machine. If there is any period one would desire to be born in, is it not the age of revolution, when the old and the new stand side by side and admit of being compared? When the energies of all men are searched by fear and by hope? When the historic glories of the old can be compensated by the rich possibilities of the new era? This time, like all times, is a very good one, if we but know what to do with it. Emerson, the American Scholar, 1837. At Brussels the wind whipped off the North Sea and through the rooming house where Jenny Marks passed the first weeks of 1848. She would have preferred to stay in Paris, but the iron laws of history, represented here by the collusion of the Prussian and French police, had cast her and Karl onto this bleak, blank-skied Eurasian shore. Life with Karl Marx was never dull. He was a short man of excess energy, intellect, and hair, with a bantam's barrel chest, a scholar's wit, and a piercing metallic voice that was a little too loud. Jenny had no money and 3 children to feed, but there was still hope, the last surprise in Pandora's box. Karl's father, a wealthy lawyer, had just died, and an inheritance was in the offing. So too, Karl promised, was the revolution in human consciousness. Until now, men have constantly had false conceptions of themselves about what they are or what they ought to be. Men had invented ideas of God and illusions of a normal man whose body existed only as the vessel of his soul. They had bowed to these idols and to the priests who curated them and the kings who protected them. Fortunately, the faculty that had led men to create and worship these spectral authorities now allowed men to see through them. Scientific knowledge of the physical world stripped man of all illusions, religious, moral, and philosophical. The bedrock of nature was the hard truth that Marx called Historical Materialism. Marx believed that the forms of human society.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?